That's why I want to hurry up because I have my Justin Bieber's tickets.
Cuyahoga County Council's regular meeting is called to order for Tuesday, April the 26th, 2016. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Ms. Brown? Here. Mr. Hairston? Here. Ms. Simon? Here. Mr. Greenspan? Here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Germana?
Here.
Mr. Gallagher?
Here.
Mr. Schron?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
And Council President Brady.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. I have nothing under item 4 tonight. Any public comments related to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. President, there are several constituents who wish to address council. May I remind the persons who wish to address council that when I call up your name, you'll have 3 minutes, and then we'll go on to the next person. So the first speaker is Marcia Goldberg.
Hello, council members and Mr. Budish. My name is Marcia Goldberg. Linda Mayer and I are vice presidents of the Board of Directors of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. Both Linda and our president, Marianne Barnes, are in Columbus today at the League's annual State House Day. They've delegated me to urge council members to approve the ordinance updating Titles 4 and 5 of the county code, already the most rigorous code of ethics of any county or municipality in the state of Ohio. League members have, from the beginning, followed the process of this extensive update word for word and gave testimony at 2 of the several committee discussions. At first, we worried that our original strong ethics law might actually be weakened in the updating process. However, our suggestions have been considered or incorporated and our doubts laid to rest. We urge you to vote yes on the proposed improvement today, and here are the reasons we find the most compelling. 1, no provisions have been altered other than to clarify or strengthen their meanings. 2, improvements have been made in the sections on ethics infractions, such as whistleblower reprisal, sexual harassment, inappropriate secondary employment, and abuse of authority. An important section has been added to clarify enforcement mechanisms. In particular, the revision clearly spells out the pertinent duties of the Inspector General, the Personnel Review Commission, and the Human Resources Department. Currently, that information is hard to find because it's in separate ordinances and procedural manuals. The dense verbatim quotations from the Code of Ohio Ethics Law have been reduced to clear references or to summary language. Number 5, excessive legalese has been reworded into more easily understood language. 6, a new provision also directs that a plain speak users or training manual be produced for easy reference by employees and other covered persons. 7, also in the interest of user friendliness, this thorough revision is divided for easy reference into sections pertaining to particular groups: employees, elected officials, contractors, lobbyists, and members of boards and commissions. The League is satisfied that nothing has been lost and much has been gained by the painstaking and deliberate process undertaken by members of Mr. Miller's committee and the Law Department. We are also heartened that the Ohio Ethics Commission has carefully vetted this revision. The only word of caution that we would inject is this: the huge project of creating a new culture of ethical government that began with much public fanfare in 2010 must never be nibbled away or succumb to a decreased public vigilance. We strongly advise that any further revisions to this very excellent code of ethics be similarly high-minded, transparent, and rare. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Dave Wondolowski.
Good evening, Council. Dave Wondolowski, represent the Cleveland Building Trades Council. I want to talk to you about ordinances 2016-4 through 7. And first of all, state that we are very much in support of your initiatives to help small and minority contractors grow and thrive in Cuyahoga County. From the very onset of these bills, we worked diligently with the law department here and through the committee process to try to come up with something that we felt was palatable for both you, us, and also the residents of Cuyahoga County. We asked for a couple of things in this legislation, and a few we got and a few we didn't. We asked for a backstop in case of a default, in where a contractor was awarded work here without a bond. We asked for some sort of fund to be set up, whether it was set up by the contractors who could not acquire a bond, and they paid in the cost of the bond to a fund, and a fund was built and established for the unforeseen circumstances of a default. Or we asked that simply money be earmarked from the budget and allocated for a fund for default. We also asked for a level playing field provision so that contractors, many of whom we work with and represent, would not be punished because they were good business people, because they were able to acquire a bond. We asked for a proposed and detailed list of pre-qualifications for who's going to be able to have their bonds waived or be part of this program. And we also asked for the creation of an advisory committee because of so many there's such a lack of detail in these four amendments that we wanted to make sure that we were here to help and propose any modifications or provisions that may help these laws be more functional. Up until this past weekend, we had the level playing field language through the committee that was voted 5-0. And we also had the creation of the advisory committee, which was voted on 5-0. Over the weekend, we understand that there are some proposed amendments that will be discussed tonight, and I urge you strongly to vote both of those amendments down. They removed the level playing field language that the committee voted on and passed, and they also amend the amendment for the advisory committee as to who appoints people from each of these organizations to serve. I thank you for your consideration. Again, we support your initiatives here, and we want to help you get to where you need to be. Thank you.
The next speaker is Dean Dilzell.
Good evening. My name is Dean Dilzell. I'm just a citizen of the county, not representing anybody. 3 minutes is to make a case about such a complicated issue about responsibilities related to delivery of health care in Cuyahoga County is kind of difficult, but I'll try to make some points. One, members of this body were intimately aware of some of the maneuvering that occurred to close Lakewood Hospital and likely other changes to hospital care in the county. The Lakewood Hospital deal was sold as a way forward in providing health care for the future, when in fact it looks like redlining of medical care and a land grab for developers. Is this body condoning or complicit in the movement of a sum greater than $100 million from publicly controlled entities to private, not-for-profit, tax-exempt corporations, a process that by all appearances is bid rigging? One of those corporations is making a concerted effort to shift a greater portion of healthcare cost for the citizens of Cuyahoga County to all taxpayers in our county. The very corporation which bragged about making $480 million on operating income of $7.2 billion in total revenues. I invite you to visit the emergency departments on the west side of the county to see just how hard getting emergency care has become. It is probable that access to health care is delayed in other parts of the county where medical services have been removed. It is very likely that this issue could result in an entirely new cohort of citizens angry with the way their government is being run. Very soon, the eyes of the nation, if not the world, will be turned on Cleveland. How do you, as the governing body of this county, want to be responsible? Thank you.
And the final speaker during this portion is Tim Linville.
Thank you, Council. Good evening. My name is Tim Linville, the Construction Employers Association Chief Executive Officer. I appreciate your time. I wanted to speak regarding 2016 ordinances 04 through 2016-06. and talk about two issues. First, we appreciate the council members and the administration's time in the recent months and years speaking with us regarding the needs of small and minority and female-owned contracting businesses, what they need in terms of prompt pay, and different issues surrounding the cash flow problem that small businesses have. That is their primary problem. And we appreciate that in this legislation, there is reference to prompt pay, and there is reference to pre-qual, albeit minimal reference in how that's going to work. But what I wanted to urge the council to do is to maintain a level playing field among the contractors that do submit a bid on a project for which there might be a bond waiver, so that all the competitors are competing on an equal playing field and there's no price advantage for the cost of that bond. And so that contractors are not disincentivized to bring themselves up to be able to get a bond. And second is to have a meaningful advisory committee process in this legislation with the council represented, the administration representative, community represented in the committee, the business community, and the construction community, each of which with their own ability to appoint the people that have the authority to speak on their behalves and the responsibility to report back to those entities. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Mr. President, Reverend Pinckney Butts would also like to address an item on the agenda.
Good evening. For Resolution 2016-79, it's confirming Karen Moss to retain her seat for the GCRTA board. If you're going to do that, I ask you to please look at what the decisions they're making down there. And I'm very, very disappointed with RTA right now. When I go down, it's just like even some of the times when I come here, I'm ignored. I've been using public transportation since I was a teenager. Before, some children don't even use public transportation at the age I've used it. And I've seen it just dwindle. And I've asked for certain things such as route increases, and they cut the routes. There's just been like multiple things. And I just want to call to task all the board members down there. And before we start just putting people in places because it's comfortable and we haven't searched out the land for other people, we need to be looking at this. My personal experience is I've had things stolen off of buses. No one did anything about it. I witnessed people, officers getting on buses and trains, bothering people that couldn't help themselves. And I've been going there for years, even when I was homeless. And I want us to consider, when I had come to you before about Thomas Pristo being appointed to a leadership position, I put him down here very, very seriously. And I don't like it that not only my voice is not heard, but people who come down there to the board, and the decisions are already made before the ideas were even presented to the public. And that's not fair to the community. Before you make a final decision to appoint anybody else in a position of leadership, not just Karen Moss, but anybody else, please hear the public voice. And I'm going to come back for the non-agenda items. Thank you very much.
That's the final speaker at this time.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for the April 12th, 2016 Committee of the Whole and the April 12th, 2016 regular meeting. Do I have it? So been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. There is nothing. I have no announcements for item 7. Does the county executive have an announcement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to say that last night I had the pleasure to speak at the celebration of the 120th anniversary of service to seniors by the Eliza Bryant Village. Eliza Bryant is the oldest operating African-American long-term care facility in the United States. It provides comprehensive geriatric services, including adult daycare, transportation, renal, dialysis, and nursing home care. It serves 1,200 frail elderly each year, and it's a real gem for our community that we should be very proud of. I also want to thank all of you who were able to come out to the State of the County speech last week. And I especially want to thank all of you for your great work over the year that gave me so many wonderful things to talk about and highlight in the speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Legislation introduced by the council, consideration of a resolution of council for first reading and referral to committee.
Resolution number 2016-0082, adopting various changes to the Cuyahoga County non-bargaining classification plan.
Refer this to Human Resources. Consideration of an ordinance of council for third reading adoption.
Ordinance number 2016-0002, amending Titles 4 and 5 of the Cuyahoga County Code to clarify the ethical rights, responsibilities, and prohibitions applicable to elected officials, employees, board members, contractors, and lobbyists of Cuyahoga County.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance, as we know, was originally adopted in 2011. It was one of our initial and guiding principles as it related to transforming county government into the new charter form of government. It was important back then that we understand and set forward the parameters and expectations not only of employees, lobbyists, contractors, those who do business with the county, but also our roles and responsibilities to constituents of the county at the same time. Over the years, we've done some minor revisions back in 12 and 13 and have made individual changes as we saw fit, being flexible to the needs and changes of our community. This exercise that we went through was a comprehensive review of the ethics ordinance. It, as the League of Women Voters and Ms. Goldberg touched on, comprehensively changed the fundamental look of the ordinance in its structure, but didn't change any of its meaning in any material way other than to further strengthen our ethics policies. I want to thank Chairman Miller for his work on chairing the committee as we went through our processes, as well as Mike King and Sister Joanne Gross, who, although not with us today, is in another capacity, was instrumental in moving this legislation forward. And I urge my colleagues' support.
Miller.
Mr. President and my colleagues, we held several hearings over a 2-month time frame in the Council Operations Committee and made amendments before recommending this legislation. I commend Councilman Greenspan for his hard work and thank the League of Women Voters for their helpful input. I was prepared to make some comments about the content of the legislation, but the summary presented by the League of Women Voters is better than what I wrote. So I'm simply going to say that for the reasons stated in the League of Women Voters summary, I strongly support the legislation and recommend it to my colleagues. Thank you.
Councilman Germano.
Mr. Chairman, please add my name.
And his name to the legislation. Anybody else?
Myself also.
So we got Mr. Harrison, we have Councilwoman Brown. All right, any other? Councilman Jones. Any other discussion? Councilman, put us all on, okay? Thank you. All right. All those in favor of the legislation, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Legislation is passed. Legislation introduced by the executive. Consideration of resolutions for first reading adoption under suspension of the rules. Could I have a motion to suspend the rules?
Mr. President, I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
And second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The rules are suspended. Clerk, please read the item into the record.
Resolution number 2016-0075, approving a proposed settlement and consent judgment in connection with Malloy et al. Versus Cuyahoga County et al., United States District Court Case Number 1:14 CV02546, authorizing the law director and/or his designee to execute any supporting documentation, authorizing the appropriation of funds for payment of settlement amounts set forth herein, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
I move to adopt. Been moved and seconded. Most of us are familiar with this. We've had discussions about this in executive session. And I need to move to accept a proposed substitute for the administration. It is just a technical substitute, something with the language on page 216. I think the word consent judgment was the key word. Mr. Law Director, do you have anything to say about this?
That's correct. The reference to consent judgment should not have been included. I apologize for that. This is simply the settlement that we discussed with you in executive session.
All right, well, I'd like to move that we accept the proposed
Second.
amendment. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the proposed substitute? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the proposed substitute, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. The proposed substitute is accepted. Any further discussion? Adopted. All those in favor of adopting the resolution on its merits as substitute, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution is adopted on its merits as substituted.
Resolution number 2016-0083, amending the 2016-2017 biennial operating budget for 2016 by providing for additional fiscal appropriations, for appropriation transfers, and for cash transfers.
To adopt.
Second.
And seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. President, this is our standard biweekly fiscal agenda. Council members submitted questions to the administration. Questions and answers are submitted on a supplementary document at each of your stations. With no further questions, I urge my colleagues' support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Consideration of resolutions for first reading and referral to committee.
Resolution number 2016-0084, confirming the county executive's appointment of Mark D. Griffin upon his taking the oath of office to serve as Inspector General of Cuyahoga County for the term July 1, 2016 through June 30, 2021.
We could refer this to the committee of the whole, but it hasn't been very long since we had our confirmation hearings. I think we're all pretty familiar with the Inspector General at this point. I would, unless there's an objection, I'd like to move this directly to the council agenda for May the 10th, 2016 for consideration for second reading adoption under suspension of rules.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. This will be moved forward. Clerk.
Resolution number 2016-0085, confirming the county executive's appointment of Michael Jeans to serve on the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Workforce Development Board for an unexpired term ending June 30, 2018.
And this will be referred to Human Resources Appointments and Equity Committee.
Resolution number 2016-0086, confirming the county executive's appointment of Chief Christopher Villand to serve on the Cuyahoga County Corrections Planning Board for an unexpired term ending December 31st, 2018.
This will also be referred to Human Resources and Appointments. Committee report and consideration of a resolution for second reading.
Resolution number 2016-0079, confirming the county executive's reappointment of Karen Moss to serve on the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority Board of Trustees for the term March 1, 2016 through February 28, 2019.
This item will move to the May 10th, 2016 council agenda for consideration for third reading adoption. Committee reports and consideration of resolutions for second reading adoption under suspension of the rules. Could I have a motion to suspend the rules?
Mr. President, I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
And second, any discussion? All those in favor of suspending the rules say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The rules are suspended.
Resolution number 2016-0078, confirming the county executive's appointment of various individuals to serve on the Cleveland-Cuyahoga County Workforce Development Board for an unexpired term ending June 30, 2018, as printed on the agenda.
Second. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted.
Resolution number 2016-0080, authorizing the transfer of real property located at East 79th Street and Hillside Road, Cleveland, also known as Hillside Community Park, permanent parcel number 124-29-010, to Burton Bell Car Development Incorporated.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, this is just a resolution authorizing a transfer of real property, East 79th and Hillside, that's owned by the county, and transferring to Burton Bell Carr. They have secured funding to redevelop this particular parcel of land and really make it beautiful. They presented in the committee, really looks nice. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it, the resolution is adopted.
Resolution number 2016-0081, making an award on requisition number 35911 to Youth Opportunities Unlimited in the amount not to exceed $5,659,912 for the temporary assistance to needy families Summer Youth Employment Program for the period May 1, 2016 through August 31, 2016.
Move to adopt.
Seconded. Any discussion, Councilman?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, this program provides youth ages 16 to 24 with summer employment opportunities. In 2015, 2,861 youth were served and placed with over 170 employers throughout the county. And I ask for my colleagues' support.
Councilman Miller.
Mr. President, I would just like my name added, please.
Please add Councilman Miller and Councilman Conwell and Councilman Simon and Councilman Harrison's name to the legislation. All right. Consideration of resolutions for third reading adoption.
Resolution number 2016-005, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President, you did not vote on that resolution.
All right. All those in favor of the previous resolution, vote say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it, the resolution is adopted.
Resolution number 2016-0056, confirming the county executive's reappointment of various individuals to serve on the Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging Board of Trustees for the term January 1, 2016 through December 31, 2018, as printed on the agenda.
So, move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, the resolution is adopted.
Resolution number 2016-0063, authorizing a First Amendment to Agreement of Sublease with Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction and consented to by Ohio Public Facilities Commission pertaining to the financing of a portion of the cost of the Cuyahoga County Community-Based Correctional Facility Project by changing the aggregate amount of project costs to be paid for or reimbursed from the Adult Correctional Building Fund from $10,800,000 to $10,842,265.
Move to adopt.
Second.
And seconded, Councilman?
Committee, and
Okay.
we recommend.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it, the resolution is adopted. Consideration of ordinances for third reading adoption.
Ordinance number 2016-0004, enacting section 503.08 of the Cuyahoga County Code to expand the Small Business Enterprise Program to allow small business set-asides.
Move to adopt.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
And Mr. Chairman, we have amendments for these items. Is this the appropriate moment right now?
Not yet,
Okay.
no. Not the way I understand it.
President.
Yes.
Mr. President, and my colleagues, to save time, I'd like to speak about the diversity ordinances as a package. I commend Council Vice President Jones, Council President Brady, and Executive Armin Budish for their leadership in putting forward this legislation. These four ordinances and the recently passed resolution aligning ourselves with the Memorandum of Understanding on Community Benefits followed from the recently completed disparity study. It should be noted that the disparity study showed that we have made progress on economic inclusion, particularly on subcontracting. The county's Small Business Enterprise Program has clearly had a positive effect for which Director Lenora Lockett and her team should be commended. However, the study also made it clear that a very significant disparity level remains, and that stronger action is needed to address the disparities. The 4 ordinances we have here, allowing small business set-asides, creating aspirational goals for MBE, FBE participation, creating an economic inclusion incentive, and creating a bond waiver program are a natural and logical progression beyond what we have previously done, consistent with the results of the disparity study. The setting of aspirational goals will not be done in an arbitrary or haphazard manner. Rather, the aspirational goals will be set industry by industry and case by case based on availability and supplier composition data obtained from the disparity study, creating goals that are both fair and achievable. The results obtained from these ordinances will be evaluated on a continuous basis. After 5 years, the disparity study needs to be updated according to both federal standards and county code, and the remedies created here will be adjusted as needed depending on how well we are doing toward our goal of full economic inclusion in Cuyahoga County. I believe that this group of ordinances gives us an economic inclusion program that will be among the most effective and legally sound anywhere in the country, and I'm happy to support the legislation.
Mr. Chair, I'm very proud of the fact that these 4 pieces of legislation that have been presented, they've been thoroughly discussed in the Public Works and Contracting Committee. We've had a lot of input on every one of them. In an effort to get these moving, the committee agreed to meet weekly, and most times we worked the full 2 hours, and we had a lot of discussion on these. So I'm very proud of the fact that we're actually moving forward with good legislation for the results of the diversity study. So that's my comment so far.
Thank you, Councilman. All those in favor of 0004, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted.
Ordinance number 2016-0005, enacting sections 503.02 to 503.07 of the Cuyahoga County Code to expand the Small Business Enterprise Program.
Adopt.
It's at 3.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted.
Ordinance number 2016-0006, enacting chapters 507 and 508 of the Cuyahoga County Code to establish the county's risk management procedures and performance bond and insurance requirements.
And Mr.
Hold on just a second. We'll get a motion on the floor. Motion to adopt.
To adopt.
Second. Now discussion. First, we're going to go to Councilman Jones, the sponsor, one of the co-sponsors of the legislation, and then we're going to go to the county executive, the other co-sponsor of the legislation, and then we'll open it up for members of the council. Councilman Jones.
Chairman, I'd like to introduce an amendment to our legislation. In fact, we have 2 amendments. The first amendment is a diversity and inclusion to the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. To provide some context for this amendment, the Public Works Procurement Committee discussed this concept over numerous meetings and determined that it would be prudent to establish an advisory committee to provide the county with advice and recommendations regarding the diversity and inclusion initiatives we are considering here today. While I initially questioned the need for this type of advisory committee, I was ultimately persuaded that such a committee could provide valuable insight for our inclusion programs. However, as I stated in the Public Works Committee, I believe the advisory committee should reflect the full spectrum of community stakeholders who will be impacted by these initiatives. Therefore, I am sponsoring this amendment. This amendment would expand the committee to now include the following members: one representative of the county executive, one member of county council, and seven other members jointly appointed by the executive and council president, who will represent the following organizations: the Urban League of Greater Cleveland, the Hispanic Roundtable, the Greater Cleveland Partnerships Commission on Economic Inclusion, the Cleveland Building and Construction Trade Council, the Construction Employment Association. Additionally, the county will have 2 other open appointments, which will provide us flexibility to include other stakeholders as may be deemed appropriate.
Could you hold off on, you want to go ahead with the Second Amendment? We're going to try to keep things.
You want to introduce both at one time? Or
Well,
do you
we're
wanna
going to have the
discuss?
county executive come up and speak. Why don't you go ahead
Introduce the second one?
and introduce the second one?
Okay. This one is to the, this amendment would remove a provision added in committee that requires the county to exclude bidders' estimated performance bond costs while scoring requests for bids or requests for proposals on contracts where performance bond waivers will be available. This section has been dubbed the level playing field provision. In reality, it is anything but. The overall proposal of this legislation is to assist small and minority businesses who have been institutionally disadvantaged on what has been a historically unlevel playing field. This provision tips the scales back towards those who have benefited from the status quo. It does nothing to level the playing field. Further, this provision effectively limits the county's ability to utilize innovative approaches to assist disadvantaged businesses in our community. There may be better ways to mitigate or any negative or unintended side effects of this particular program, and the county should have the flexibility to determine what is most effective and make any necessary adjustments along the way. This provision legislates a corrective measure before the program has even had a chance to get up and running. I am therefore sponsoring this amendment to remove this restrictive provision and ensure the county has all the tools it needs to assist small businesses and correct the disparities that have been identified.
Thank you, Councilman. We're now going to ask the county executive to either come up or stay where you are, whichever you prefer, and address the legislation and the amendments.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for taking up the diversity and inclusion legislation this evening. I thank Councilman Jones for his leadership, and I'd like to thank all the council members who are co-sponsoring and supporting this legislation. The county recently completed a disparity study, and the results confirmed what many people already believed. Minorities and women are not getting a fair shake when it comes to contracting. The legislation before you today, along with the Community Benefits Resolution, which you've already adopted, and the executive orders, which I'll be signing, should move us a long way towards fairness and equity. The legislation before you does a number of things. It allows us to set aspirational goals for minority and women businesses and requires good faith efforts to reach those goals. It allows the county to waive performance bonds for qualified contractors or vendors on jobs up to $250,000. It allows the county to set aside certain contracts for qualified small businesses. It allows the county to give a bid preference to bidders that either utilized minority businesses or women businesses within the last 2 years, or that employed a diverse workforce within the last 2 years. And it establishes a diverse advisory committee to provide advice on the county's diversity and inclusion programs. This package of initiatives will make a difference. It should give minorities and women a real chance to get their foot in the door. I do want to urge this council to adopt both amendments that have been introduced by Councilman Jones. But I will limit my comments to the amendment which will eliminate paragraph E of section 508.02. As currently written, the paragraph would actually harm small businesses and give an advantage to large companies. And it would cost the county money as well. I can best explain by using an example. Let's say a small business bids $100,000 on a project. A big company bids $101,000. But the big company estimates the cost for its bond at $2,000. As written, the legislation says that the big company's bid would be considered to be only $99,000 because we'd have to subtract the cost of the bond. So this paragraph E would actually make it harder, not easier, for a small business to get the job. And the county would end up paying the $101,000 rather than the $100,000. So we would pay an extra $1,000 under the way this language is currently written. The purpose of this legislation, as originally introduced, is designed to give small businesses a chance to get their foot in the door with small jobs. I ask council to amend 508.02 and delete paragraph E. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to see if we can have this discussion to the extent we need to for both the amendments separately than at the same time. It's a little bit confusing. So, Councilman, you've made the motion to amend. You've introduced a proposed amendment for the first amendment, which is on your desk, and this involves the advisory committee. Do we have a second for that amendment? Second. Amendment has been moved and seconded. Now, is there any further discussion about this? Councilman Germana, then Councilman Miller, and then Councilman Schron. We'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This provision was discussed, and it was actually introduced at the recommendations of the Building Trades, the Contractors Association, because it's worked well in the city of Cleveland with Fannie Lewis. And, based on that, we're all for it. We heard this in committee, and part of the discussion was, well, let's expand it, and I agree with expanding it. Councilman Jones wanted to expand it and get a group from that would represent women and also the Hispanic community. So I agree with the expansion, and we went ahead and moved this to the full council for vote with the idea that there was going to be an amendment adding these people. Now, there was some concern expressed to me that all of a sudden, instead of these different organizations just putting somebody on the committee, that they would be nominated and approved by council. And I understand that as well. At first, I didn't understand it, but any board or commission, people get nominated. And contrary to what Reverend Pinckney said today, our minds are not made up before we even get the legislation. We hear these nominations. Councilwoman Conwell runs a great human resources committee. We get the recommendations of the administration. We get the people to testify before us. So asking for confirmation of council to whoever they're going to submit is not unreasonable. So with that, I have no problem. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with, we have one representative from the county executive and then one from the president of council, and then we got two. I would have preferred this go back to committee, but at this point, I'm willing to go forward with this amendment.
Mr. Germana, Councilman Miller.
Mr. President and my colleagues, I heard the testimony this afternoon from the labor community raising concerns about the way in which the members of the advisory committee would be appointed. And I think those concerns have merit, and I would encourage the executive and the council president to work very closely with the organizations on the appointments so that they may feel that the appointees represent the organizations. However, paramount is, in my mind, is the idea that the committee should be broadly inclusive, which this amendment does, and therefore I am in support of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. When we have other bodies like this in the public sector, for example, the Economic Development Commission, we have almost these exact same titles of organizations. Somebody from the GCP, for example, somebody from the Port Authority. We don't stick our opinion in there from either the council president or the county executive as to who should be representing the Port Authority or who should be representing GCP. That's the name that comes directly from those bodies. So it is their belief that in the Cleveland Building Trades that they're going to know who they want to have, they believe, the best person to be on this body. And so we don't actually review those names, Mr. Germano, on the Economic Development Commission. We're creating a new commission here, and I believe that we should, as the way it was originally drafted, which is one representative appointed by the executive director of, for example, the Cleveland Building Trades, the Construction Employer Association, would be where that name would come from. So I disagree, and I'll be voting against this amendment.
Thank you, Councilman Strawn. Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you. We did work really hard in committee to manage to get this provision in, and I really appreciated the information and advice I got from the trades, and that's why I voted in committee to add this, and I like that it's broadened. I just want to address Councilman Strawn. There are boards and commissions to which we appoint that we do not get self-appointed from those bodies. So there's nothing consistent about how this happens, other than council usually having to confirm the appointee, which I'm glad we're doing. The only thing I would want to see here, and I'm not sure this is the appropriate place, is that we be able to get names from all of these participants, one or two names of who they would like to see serve. I know informally that's going to happen, I hope. I assume our president will get together with each of these bodies, and we'll informally get names and be able to go through those. But that's the one piece of discomfort I have, is I probably would want to hear formally a couple names coming from not only the trades, but Hispanic Roundtable, Urban League. We can't piecemeal this. It has to be all of these are treated the same. So I would like to see that in there, but if it's not going back to committee to add that, then at this point we'll support it. But I would be more comfortable if we could at least codify that we'll get a couple names from each of these representatives on the committee.
Thank you, Councilwoman Simon. Councilman Greenspan.
Thank you, Mr. President. This obviously the inclusion of this committee I support, and I support the expansion of the committee as was originally presented and as is written in the legislation. But the challenge I have, and the reason I won't be supporting this, is I as Mr. Strawn, believe that the organizations themselves should have the authority as to who to represent them. And I am not aware, and maybe our law director can answer this, to Ms. Simon's point, I'm not aware of a scenario similar to this in any committee within the county where the county appoints an organization's representative. And if there is such an appointment, I'd like to be directed to that. Regardless of that, I am in favor of the expansion. However, I am not supportive because of the selection process of the members of those organizations. Thank you.
Councilman, thank you. We will get that information to you. There are, in fact, many committees where what we're doing is consistent. Exactly. Thank you. All those in favor of Councilwoman Simon? Really?
Would it be problematic if I make a motion to include a provision that, we would get a couple names from each of these representatives and go from there?
If I problematic, I will work, and I will work with the executive and be very careful to make sure that the organizations are happy with the representatives that serve on this commission, as I'm sure the executive will as well.
I will defer to the president.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. God knows I appreciate that. All those in favor of accepting the proposed Amendment 1, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Council, why don't we have a roll call on this, okay?
Okay, that would
So we're
be
clear and
very,
there's no
very
confusion
preferable.
over it, and
Thank you, Mr. President.
say anything about it later.
Calling the roll on this amendment, Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Hairston?
Yes.
Ms. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan? No. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Schron?
No.
Ms. Conwell? Yes. Mr. Jones? Yes. And Council President Brady?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, Councilman Jones has proposed a second amendment, that we have a second for the second amendment, which should also be in front of you. I'll second the amendment. Is there any discussion on the proposed amendment, proposed second amendment?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilman.
as you know, I would have preferred that this go back to committee and get discussed in committee. We spent a lot of time on this. What the verbiage in section E, what it codified is what was testified before the committee as to how the administration would handle a level playing field. And for anyone to say that this E is not leveling the playing field, I guess they don't understand the free enterprise system, okay? The free enterprise system, and as we had testimony in committee, small contractors, they don't get a bond with just a wish. They're vetted by a bonding company, and practically all small contractors have got to personally sign and indemnify in order to get a bid and performance bond. Now, this is just for Cuyahoga County. But the fact of the matter is, there's more jobs out there in general that we hopefully in future years could come up with a program where we could help small minority and women contractors get jobs outside of the county business. That's where the real business is. And we had testimony saying that there wasn't that many jobs that are even going to qualify. We're talking about 6 to 10 to a dozen. And of course, now we have the ability, since we will have some process, to start breaking down some of these bid projects so that we could take advantage of helping more small businessmen. So here's my problem with this. If you get a small woman or minority business or Hispanic business that has got family and community backing them, they've worked diligently inside the rules, are able to get a performance bond. So what we have is some small, not big business, I'm talking about small, good, well-managed minority and women businesses that could get a bond, that may have borrowed money in order to put up a cash deposit in order to be bonded. And they're not going to be able to have a level playing field bidding against another minority or woman contractor that doesn't have to have a bond. How is that fair? It's ridiculous. Now, the other thing is this whole concept should not be just on construction. There's services and supplies that the county buys, and, sometimes we require performance bonds, sometimes we don't. So I'm all for taking the spirit of what the disparity study showed us, but taking the fairness out of this by not having a level playing field, I think is unfair. And I'm going to be voting against this.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Jones.
Thank
and
you,
then
Mr.
Councilman
Chairman.
Strawn.
The term of level playing field, I feel like I need to take it back because those of that original amendment have used the term level playing field, and that's not how I would want the community to perceive of the concept of an unlevel playing field. For over 100 years, the playing field has been unlevel, and we're making efforts to level the playing field. This amendment tries to distinguish between the bigger companies that have afforded and pay the cost of a performance bond, and the smaller companies who don't have that cost in their budget because they couldn't get a performance bond. And because we are making an effort to waive the bond, to give smaller opportunities, a small business an opportunity, there's some concept or co-opting of the term level playing field to think that the big companies are being disadvantaged by the small companies. And I just have to fundamentally disagree with that assertion. The playing field is not unlevel. This, if we go briefly through the history of this particular amendment, it was originally a 2% charge to the small businesses, because if the big companies had to pay for a performance bond, to make the small companies pay for something, to level the playing field between the big and small. And the administration presented to this committee that we have tools that we use as a policy when we say appropriately to waive the big companies' performance bond costs. And so we level the playing field administratively as a policy and don't necessarily need it done legislatively. And the amendment to charge a 2%, what I can call a new barrier to the small businesses, that amendment was withdrawn after the comments of the administration. Okay, but it was then reintroduced as the amendment I'm opposing today to simply make law what the administration said they would do as a policy, to simply pull that cost out of the large companies' budget line when they bid on a contract. And again, being a policy by the administration, the amendment was introduced to make it a law, make the administration always have to do this. And it was too restrictive, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, allow the administration to play with the tools that they have at their disposal as a policy. And as we figure things out, let's not tie their hands immediately before we even know everything that works or potentially could work. And I see this codifying of the administration's policy as a hindrance and not, and so as the executive has said, I do oppose this amendment. And again, I ask my colleagues to vote to remove this amendment as well.
Mr. President?
Councilman Strawn has indicated that he wants to speak. Then we'll go to Councilman Miller, and we'll go to Councilman Greenspan.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to say that I disagree with my colleague as far as Mr. Jones on why somehow it was improper to take out the 2% fee, because essentially what we're talking about here is we are self-insuring as a county, this risk. So this is not something we're just waiving. We might be waiving the charge, but let's acknowledge the fact of what we're really doing. We are actually taking on the risk as a county. So every time we waive this, we are accepting, every person in this room and everyone listening to this is accepting the obligation to pay for that. If that concrete spoils, if it starts to break up, and if anybody has ever walked on a concrete that's failed, we know what it looks like. It starts to break up. So if there is no bond, there is nothing to support it, we're saying we're going to self-insure that. I understand that the 2% came out. I am saying that I will be voting against this on that basis, because why is it fundamentally fair that we shouldn't be charging. We're self-insuring already, so we are taking on that risk, and we're not charging that component out there. I also disagree with the county executive's point of view in his analysis as the way it went. Would we be asking anybody to show up without unemployment insurance? Why don't we waive that? Why don't we waive workers' compensation insurance to show up? Because these are policies that have to be built in to that $100,000 bid that the county executive just referred to. Would we waive liability insurance if somebody trips and falls on the behalf of that contractor? No, those are all built into that $100,000 contract that was quoted by that individual. So why are we accepting this? Because we're saying, really, a bond, if you just take the word bond, put the equal sign, equals insurance. And that's what it's really about. We are saying that we are going to self-fund this level of insurance. We are going to do that on behalf of the individual. When you say that the $100,000 quote and the $101,000 quote with the bond in it gives an unfair advantage if this stays in place, that's like saying the county didn't get any benefit from that $2,000 insurance policy in the event that there's a failure on that particular contract. I would disagree with the county executive. We now have an insurance policy with that bond that would be coming along with that bid. That would be part of what we received. In addition to services, we would receive that. So what we're doing now is we are stepping into the shoes of the insurance company. We're stepping into the shoes without asking for that to be paid for. We're asking that contractor who is going to put forth that $100,000 bond or $100,000 package. I'm really hoping that they become $150,000, a $200,000, a $250,000, and guess what? Once they receive one bid above that, a penny above that, we're now going to require them to do something that they should have been doing all along, which is have a price in there for a surety bond. Because the very next day, it's going to be in the price of their quotes. So what we're actually doing, we're doing a disservice to any of those companies if they're not including that as part of their cost of doing business. We're doing a disservice to every taxpayer to not having some kind of coverage for that, because sure as shooting, one of these days, somebody is going to fail on their project. It's not necessarily with somebody with a bond or without a bond. It just happens. And what we're saying here is we're going to exempt this group not to have to pay for it. We wouldn't exempt them on any other insurance that they're going to sit up and be there responsible when they're quoting out there. So ultimately, the group that we should be looking at is not anybody on these sheets of paper. It should be the taxpayers. And how did the taxpayer benefit from waiving one of the elements of insurance where we're not waiving a single other insurance for that quote? And so I will be voting against the amendment.
Well, Councilman, if I
Sorry,
might,
Councilman, excuse me, we seem to have a debate going here.
as the sponsor, I'd like to be able to respond to that. Thank you. Thank you. Let's acknowledge first that we're talking about $250,000 waiving a performance bond. And for anyone in TV land or in the room who doesn't know what a performance bond is, it is a bond that a company has that will cover their failure to provide the work that whether they're building a building, doing work for the county. If they fail to perform, the bond, money is used from the bond that they have to pay for the work, the failure to perform, okay? And a company needs that. I believe in performance bonds, but we are waiving them because companies in this county, tax-paying companies and individuals, have not been able to get these performance bonds, okay? And we are waiving them, but we have a risk management division, and their job is to determine the risk of waiving such a performance bond. We must mitigate our risk and protect the taxpayers' dollars. Now, we're talking about, again, contracts under $250,000, which really aren't a lot. I think over the last few years, I think we've only done actually one in under $250,000 in the last one per year over the last few years. So we're not talking about a significant amount of money. And to put it into further context, we built a convention center hotel that cost $260 million, and it did not have a performance bond attached to it. Our risk management division of this county mitigated the risk by requiring a corporate guarantee from Turner Construction in lieu of a performance bond. So there are tools available to protect this county. If we can do it for $260 million, then we have the capacity to do it for $250,000 and contracts that small. We can do that. But I also said I do believe in performance bonds. Let me just share with you what has happened. I was going to say this later, but I think it's appropriate now. Because we are considering voting on waiving smaller companies from having a performance bond, we have been descended upon by so many in the surety industry who sell these bonds. And they certainly have been very vocal, and they've spoken to me about their apprehension about what we're doing and feel that their products should continue to be attached to the work we do in Cuyahoga County at all times. And I would expect a company to say such a thing. But I met with them. I don't see them as adversarial. I met with them Friday, and I said, it is my intention to continue to move forward and waive performance bonds when appropriate. But I want the companies of this county, minority, female, small business, regardless of color, to have an opportunity to get a performance bond. And that has been, they have not had that opportunity in the years past. What can you do to help better penetrate the minority, African American, female, Hispanic populations, companies in this county, taxpayers in this county, to help them purchase your product? Okay. They began to talk to me about educating the contractors around their product. And I stopped them. I said, no, we don't need further education. Education is important, and everyone coming into this industry certainly should be educated. But there is a viable, strong contingent of companies, minority, Hispanic, female, African American, that exist in this county who have not had a fair opportunity. How can you give them an opportunity to purchase your product? And we had a vibrant conversation, a good conversation around that. And they have sent a letter, I'll share at a later point, where they talk about their willingness and efforts. They even shared with me the fact that they had just, in the last few days before our meeting, given $1 million contract, $1 million performance bond to a minority female company in this county. One who has done business with this county over the years, a viable company that we would all recognize. And I said, I'm very happy about that, but one is not enough. We certainly want you to continue to penetrate this community. So that contractor was extremely happy, but I got the feeling from them that they want to do more. And if it wasn't for this legislation, then they would not have come from Washington, D.C., to be able to have that conversation around that. So I do support us making the efforts to move forward, but there's more than what we just do legislatively. Access to capital has to be done from the conversation from the administrative side, as well as as councilmen, our individual conversations with these industries, again, to help everyone within this county who is a taxpayer take advantage of the contracting opportunities that are available. And this amendment, as I again move to eliminate this particular amendment, I think eliminating this will continue to help us to move the needle in the right direction for minority contractors. And again, not only minority, small business, regardless of color, are going to benefit. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to do a little traffic control here. Councilman Miller indicated to me, and Greenspan.
Mr. President and my colleagues, it's not a question of small businesses versus large businesses. What we want is for small and minority businesses who are able to get bonds to compete on a fair and equal basis against businesses that have their bonds waived under this program. I think we've maybe lost sight of the fact that the purpose of this program is to enable small and minority-owned businesses to become bondable and to get bonds. But if we remove Section E, what we're doing is we're creating an incentive for businesses not to become bondable because they have an advantage if they can bid without the bonds. So I have been told that there are enough votes to take this language out of the ordinance. And so if that in fact happens, I would just call upon the administration using this flexibility to find some means of dealing with the impact that the cost of the bond is going to have itself on the bidding process, so that it indeed is fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. Councilman Greenspan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The ordinance as currently presented prior to this amendment, I believe by itself meets the original intent of providing an opportunity to those who have not had an opportunity in the past for failure to obtain a bond to participate in county work. However, I've never been of the belief of guaranteeing outcomes. The removal of this provision will unlevel the playing field. It will, as openly acknowledged, give others an opportunity and an advantage that others, and I'll qualify that as small businesses. We have over 200 small businesses, SBEs registered with the county in construction alone today. Now, not all of them have had to meet the requirement, but those are the businesses that are currently registered. You're not talking about competing with Turner. You're not talking about competing with Carvo Paving. They're not going to bid on $250,000 contracts. It's too costly for them to complete the bid. Their efforts are better spent in their businesses on larger projects. You are competing head-to-head with small businesses. And if a small business has the advantage of qualifying for a performance bond, they will be disadvantaged in competing against those who don't. And that's what this amendment will provide, is that unlevel playing field. There was a discussion regarding the 2%. I sponsored that legislation as well. The reason the 2% was removed was because the inclusion of paragraph D in the current legislation, which gives risk management the opportunity to determine an annual assessment as to our exposure. So there is a reserve component, but at the end of the day, as Mr. Schron and Mr. Germanis said, the county is at risk. And at the end of the day, whether the 2% or 3% bond premium is assessed to a contract, the county pays that premium anyhow, but the risk offset is there by the surety. Once again, I, as Mr. Miller, believe that there are votes here to approve this amendment and to remove the provision. If that occurs, well, let's put it this way. I'm not going to support the legislation because the past amendment that was adopted, this to me was a very significant amendment that I authored to be in the legislation. And they're not mutually exclusive in my mind. They're tied to one another. So the exclusion of the previous amendment provision and this provision as well will disqualify my support for this legislation. Thank you.
Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you very much. I have to say I am confused because I sat through several committee meetings, and I think at the last one or the one before, I was told by the administration that they in fact would do this. They would remove the cost of obtaining a bond from companies that did not receive a waiver. I heard that specifically, that was the policy they were going to enact. But then I heard from the executive the contrary, I think, who said that if we did such a thing, it would give somebody else an advantage. I need to understand what exactly, before I vote on this, the policy of the administration is going to be, because that matters. In committee, I heard that very specifically, but I think I heard something else from the executive. Because I will support this only with the understanding that the administration is going to commit to removing the cost of obtaining bonds, because that does not level the playing field. It gives an unfair advantage, I think, to those who can't obtain bonds.
If I could,
to me, wait. I want to hear from the administration. And what this means to me, level playing field, is that people have a seat at the table. That's what this means. And by waiving the bond and making this cost neutral, we'll get everybody at the table, but not give anybody an advantage. So that's my interpretation of what a level playing field means. Everybody can be there and be participating in this bid process. But if I'm not hearing specifically that this is going to be happening at the administration, I can't do this.
and the administration certainly can speak.
I don't want to codify things. I agree with that. I'm not prone to codifying every administrative policy. Somehow this I need an addendum or some attachment to this. That's going to be the plan of the administration. And it doesn't have to be legislatively.
Anybody from the administration speak to this issue? Thank you, Councilwoman Simon.
Darlene White from Risk Management. Yes, when this issue came up before, when this was first introduced, it was introduced as an option in response to one of the things that the mentioned 2% fee towards the small businesses. And in order to address the concern that had been put out there at that particular time, this was presented as an option. I did indicate that I thought that it should be vetted more with OPD and with Public Works, and I emphasized that I did not think that it should be codified at all, that there was more work to be done, and we needed the flexibility from an administrative standpoint to even try to entertain something of this nature.
I was under the impression that that was going to be the goal, was to remove this cost. And unless that I have some confirmation here that that's happening, and we can have that on the record and it's attached to this, that this is going to be the administrative policy within whatever it is, 90 days, I'm not comfortable with this. I really need assurance from the administration that this is going to happen in 90 days, and I will come back with something if it's not. I want to support this, but I'm uncomfortable because I heard two different things.
Councilman, I heard, when you heard what was said, what I heard was that it is a tool of the administration, that it is one tool that they use. So it's not that they don't do it. They acknowledge that it is a tool that they use of removing that cost when awarding bids. It is a tool. But with all policy, you have to have the flexibility to use it when appropriately. And my concern was that the amendment to turn to codify their policy was not appropriate. Don't tie their hands and force them. Allow them to use the tool as they see appropriate. And then if in some miraculous way we think they have not done their job appropriately, then maybe we come back and revisit it. But it is a tool that they introduced to this committee that Councilman Greenspan then codified what they said. It was not his brainchild. He heard Darlene present this, and he chose to codify a policy that they brought to us. So this is their idea, not ours. So we don't have to champion that at least I don't argue champion codifying something that the administration told us they do.
If I can just finish, I'm not comfortable. I thought this was the goal of the administration. That's what I heard in committee, that without that, I don't think it should be codified either. I agree with that. But I need some assurance in some way today that this is going to happen, that this is going to be worked in. I don't think it's a tool. I think as a matter of course, this cost should come out when reviewing bids. Is that not something you're going to be doing?
Well, during initial discussions with Public Works and OPD, we were trying to figure out if this would be a viable option of addressing it. Again, there were a lot of fluid discussions during that time period trying to address that issue. So it was something that we were looking at in terms of an option, but never intended for it to actually be put in place until we were able to properly vet it more from an administrative standpoint. So I'm unable, and I don't think that the administration is unable to assure that that's going to be a part of the process at this point.
What's so hard to
particularly
vet it?
after-
I don't understand, if I may, just for a minute,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
President, why is it so hard to vet that? I mean, it's a pretty easy calculation to remove the cost as indicated on a submitted bid, what the cost is, and to extract that out when reviewing the bids. Why is that hard, or why does it have to be vetted? It's an easy calculation to take that out. Is it just a question that you may not want to do it?
Well, upon further discussion, obviously for the reason that it's been being amended, the proposed amendment for today is that there are issues that have to be worked out in terms of whether it actually eviscerates the benefit that will be provided to these small businesses. It's almost akin as if you invite them to the table, but if they get a bigger piece of the cake, you pull the chair out from up under them. So it's like, what do you do in the aspect you provide them with a benefit, but you don't really allow them to have that? So that's the very nature that the reason that we're having this discussion with respect to the amendment is to make sure that there's no unfair disadvantage for those businesses who can actually afford those performance bonds. And as assured with respect to other issues that have come up with this legislation, we are committed to taking a look at things to make sure that there's nothing that's will be unfair to anyone that will be involved in this process.
Mr. President, I'm just taken aback at the position. So
Councilwoman, I'd like to suggest something unique,
Okay.
given the nature of this conversation, and that's that we take a 5-minute break and return to continue this very important discussion.
We should have gone back to committee.